Hi, my name is John Flett. I'm a developmental pediatrician, and I'd like to share with you some important concept about autism, or ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. And it instills a lot of fear and confusion amongst doctors, parents, teachers. It affects between 1 and 2% of every child born. It's often a developmental problem that is there at birth and then manifests and unfolds itself as a child develops. When a child's young and small as a baby, they don't express many kind of symptoms because all they can do is look. They can't really communicate, so it's difficult to often pick these things up. So I'd like to share with you some very important early developmental signs that are going to help you detect and particularly kind of have a suspicion of a problem. So I'm going to share with you some 16 early signs that you can kind of pick up before the age of 18 months. You know, it helps to detect before it's actually diagnosed, because early detection means that you can intervene and have a huge impact on your child for the duration of their life. And it should be something that can be diagnosed and picked up by the age of 2 years. You know, the first 2 years of a child's life is when the neurological development is at its prime point. If you can intervene, if you can kind of do something, particularly in that first 5 years, a child's ability to learn language development, be receptive to so much that we can give in the form of therapy. Babies are natural born explorers. They are motivated to learn right from birth, and they get their learning from their fascination with the surroundings and anything that captures their attention, particularly a human face. They're drawn towards people, and that you can see from the age of 1 to 2 months. So those are early developmental signs that can give us an indication that there could potentially be an issue. Early signs of autism are very easy to miss, but it can be picked up between the age of 18 and 24 months. Unfortunately, it's not often diagnosed before the age of 5 years. By catching it early, you get access to intervention, and early intervention is the success story for every child with ASD, or autistic spectrum disorder. And, you know, I'm going to help you with these particular kind of signs that often kind of are unfolded in the first 9 to 16 months. Diagnosing autism is difficult because there's no blood test. It is based on behavior, symptoms, and features, and there are 3 major factors. It's that social communication, that ability to have awareness, to communicate, to have appropriate interaction with the world around you. From the time a baby's born, there's no set of rules, but there seems to be sort of a genetic ability to have an awareness. And then, of course, there's language that's affected. And number 3, it's that behavior, repetitive behaviors, echolalia, repeating things, and to have sort of particular, what we call stereotypical behaviors. Everybody knows about that hand flapping. So those are the 3 cornerstones of the areas that are affected. And in fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that all children be screened for autism between the ages of 18 and 24 months. Autism can be diagnosed before 24 months, but unfortunately it's only diagnosed around about the age of 5 years. So the early signs of autism can have this cascading effect on the brain development and lead to a significant, as I've just said, social, language, intellectual problems, as well as challenging behaviors if they're not caught early and given that intervention they deserve. So number 1, it's hard to get your baby to look at you. It should be easy to get a baby to look at you. Babies have a natural, instinctive kind of fascination with the human face. But children with autism don't really have that, particularly if it's a first-time parent, because who do you compare it to? How do you know what's normal or abnormal? So that is the first thing that you should kind of look at and, have an awareness that your baby should have this natural affinity for human faces. Number 2, a child really shares enjoyment. You look at any baby, they're looking at their parent. They're looking automatically for that reciprocal kind of validation. They're constantly looking at something, wanting to share, wanting to kind of have validation. Children with autism don't seem to have that. And as a result, they don't smile as much. And they don't share that enjoyment because smiling isn't a sharing. It's a shared experience. They tend to have more like a mask-like kind of flat effect. Really smile. So that you may not know when they're actually happy. Number 3. Your child really shares interests with you. That's part of the social communication that goes wrong. Babies are eager to share their interests with their first little gestures, like showing, pointing, and then with words and sounds. And notice that when your baby pays attention, to figure out what they're interested in, they don't seem to point, they don't seem to be able to involve you. If your baby really shares interests with you, this can be a sign. They really respond to their name. A name is such a social kind of imprinting. They tend to know who they are with that reference to name. They know when you are kind of sharing and trying to attract their attention. Babies are tuned in to listen to a mother's and a father's voice. When you call their name, they should respond by looking at you. Babies really do respond to social little kind of what we call little sort of cues. Come here. You put out your arms and reach out. Wave bye-bye that you're leaving. Touching kind of different body parts. Or looking at where you're going or pointing. Children with autism don't seem to respond by looking and pointing in the same way. And don't look at your hand. They don't seem to know about these social gestures. Putting your arms out. They kind of don't understand that. A natural understanding that that is a social gesture to kind of invite. Or older children, when people put their hands up, they don't understand. They sometimes take it as a threatening behavior. If your baby doesn't respond to their name, that's something to think about. They use limited gestures, such as show and point. They don't want to involve. They don't want to kind of share. Babies are eager to draw your attention to things generally they're interested in. And pointing by 12 to 14 months, these gestures generally is an indication of the development of words. An early sign is this limited use of gestures and pointing. Number 6, it's hard for them to look at you and use a gesture or sound. Babies learn gestures and sounds from about 16 months to 9 months. And they let you know what they want or what they don't want. They certainly begin to use that word no and what they're interested in. It should be easy for your baby to use a gesture and a sound while they're looking at you. If it's hard for your baby to look at you and use a gesture or sound all at the same time, this can be an early sign of autism. They have little or no imitation of what people are pretending, kind of a pretend and imaginative play. By 13 months, children learn by observing and imitating and copying others and doing what they say. They use a variety of little actions like, putting a sippy cup to their mouth and using a spoon to eat with and imitating and sharing a play, an imaginative play. From this they learned that pretend. They may offer you the same sippy cup or bottle, or a teddy bear to hug and cover them with a blanket, or a kind of, little jiggle, a pan with an invisible stuff inside and pretend to cook. Children with autism usually have strengths in using objects as like solitary play. They use it as like an instrument, not as something that is a kind of a play-like object. It's more kind of as sort of a concrete sort of an object to bash with, hit with. They don't actually use it imaginative play. So if your child is showing little or no imaginative play, that's something just to be aware of. Using your hand as a tool. Babies learn a variety of gestures, like giving, reaching, raising arms, showing, waving, and pointing. Because children with autism have this limited use of early gestures, they may develop unusual ways to communicate. They use your hand as like a tool. They're unable to kind of, use their own gestures. They've got to kind of get you and pull you towards what they want and what they don't want. If your baby is moving or pulling your arm or part of your body as a tool, this can be an early sign of autism, particularly if they're not looking at you directly. Number 9, interested in objects as people. Babies are eager to interact with people and use objects as a way to attract your attention. If your baby is more interested in the objects than the person, that can be a sign. Number 10, unusual ways of moving fingers and hands or body. This is this kind of abnormal behavior with body and physical movement. Babies with autism show unusual stiffening or flaring of their fingers and unusual ways of posturing or moving their body parts, like hand flapping or repetitive movements. Number 11 is this repeats of unusual movements with objects. Babies with autism may repeat unusual movements with their body parts, like spinning, wobbling, knocking, rocking, and rolling. Repetitive movement. It's almost kind of a way to kind of de-stress themselves. Develop rituals, and they may get upset with any change or kind of transitions. Babies learn morning, nighttime routines, make activities predictable, provides this learning opportunity. Babies usually flow from changes in routine, such as ending an activity early or adding a new step. Children with autism may develop rituals and be unwilling to kind of complete a series of behaviors in a different way. If your child's insistent certain behaviors and they get upset if there are unexpected changes and they have these emotional meltdowns, this could be an early sign. Do they have an unusual, excessive, specific interest in an object or activity, like an obsession with dinosaurs, an obsession with a particular object? They've got to have it there. Babies really shift their attention. They don't actually kind of focus in a normal way on one particular object. They move between many. But a child with autism is kind of obsessed. They want one particular thing, creating opportunities to learn from social interactions. Children with autism, they tend to be one track. They show excessive interest in a particular object. They get stuck, get over-focused almost on this. They have this intense interest that can lead to almost kind of an unusual kind of behavior. And, children with autism, they kind of get fixed on particular shapes or numbers. If your child is showing these kind of symptoms, this can be a sign. They tend to, number 14, be very focused or attracted to unusual objects. Babies with autism get very focused or linked to an object that is unusual for the age, such as like long strips of cloth, utensils, chains, rocks, sticks, like flowing water or gadgets. They tend to be unusual for the age. So that could be an early sign. Unusual sounds, sights or textures. Babies with autism show unusual reactions and very sensitive, like almost these sensory problems. Sensitive to sounds, sights, textures. They become overly excited by just like a page in a book or something that they hold in their hands, over their ears in response to loud noises. They squint or flap their hands to certain lights, gag when certain foods' textures. So this sort of sensory processing, like someone turned up the volume with all these senses. They show strong interest in unusual sensory experiences. They show unusual interest such as excessive rubbing of certain textures, looking out the side of the eye, closely inspecting a block or a toy train as it rolls. Also like doing unusual things like licking objects. If your child shows these, this is something you should think about. So what if your child shows these signs? I've created on my website a free tool for you to kind of, it's called MChat. It's a assessment using international criteria to produce a score that might indicate that your child has a particular problem. If your child with this particular symptom kind of complex shows more than 4 signs, it could be an indication. So if you'd like to talk to us further, you can contact us on 031 1000 474. And then finally, I'd like to just talk about developmental red flags. So at what stage should you need to kind of get immediate kind of help from your pediatrician or seek medical advice? You need to go to somebody who understands these. General doctors won't spend their time doing them. It's not their fault. They have to know a lot about everything. Pediatricians, we know about children from before their birth right up until adulthood. By 6 months, a child who doesn't have big smiles or warm, joyful expressions, that's a problem. 9 months. No back and forth sharing of signs, smiles, or facial expressions. At age 12, lack of response to their name. If they're not responding to their name, there's a problem. By 12 months, they should be babbling and they should kind of be talking. If they're just babbling and have baby talk, that's a problem. By 12 months, there's no kind of gestures that are sharing, such as pointing, showing, reaching, or waving. By 16 months, if your child's not talking, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a problem with autism, but it is a sign that you need to get help. By 24 months, there's no meaningful using 2 words, joining words together that don't involve imitation and repeating. So I hope that helps you understand. It helps you kind of have a sense of when you need to get